Wonderful. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. It is a good day for poetry. All righty. It looks like we're filling up. Let's see. Let's go to gallery. Okay. All right. Well, zoom, zoom, zoom. Thank you to my special guests. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to Beth Franklin, who generously sponsors our show. This is the third in a three-part, maybe four-part series. We'll talk about doing a special fourth one this fall. We've had great success with this series, so big thanks to Beth and the Colorado Poets Center. Tonight, we'll be talking about poets who are interested in other mediums and the relationship between poetry and so many other mediums that we all love and enjoy. For those who don't know me, my name is Wendy Videlock. I'm coming to you from the western slope of Colorado. In fact, we're so far west in Colorado, here in Palisade, we're practically Utah. The land that surrounds us is part of who we are. It reflects our histories. Therefore, I'd like to start by acknowledging that this land is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, and Ute tribes. The Utes originally comprised 13 tribal bands, and each lived within or inhabited an area of Colorado, as well as parts of what we now know as Utah, Wyoming, New Mexico, Kansas, Texas, and Oklahoma. The original peoples of Colorado have maintained their presence here for more than 18,000 years. In this way, we acknowledge the difficult history of the land and of the people to whom it rightfully belongs. Another thank you to those in the audience without whom we would just be talking to ourselves. A big thanks to our special panelists tonight who have agreed to share their knowledge and wisdom and their works, and who have agreed to allow me to pick their brains and explore their talented multimedia hearts tonight. We'll go about an hour and 15 minutes tonight, and any questions that anybody in the audience has or any responses. Oh, hello, Julianza. Anybody who'd like to add a question or a comment, just go ahead and put it in the Q&A or the chat. I'll check both of them periodically. If I forget, Beth, give me a reminder. Thank you, dear. All right, before I introduce our special guests, I'd like to say a few words about poets who came before us and their interest in exchanging hats. Not a lot of people know that Elizabeth Bishop was a visual artist, a gifted one. She scarcely acknowledged herself as an artist, and yet her work, mostly watercolor and gouache, reveals a keen and original sensibility. It's said that she enjoyed being both innovative and invisible as a visual artist, because as a poet, she was pretty well known in her lifetime. Lorca, not a lot of people know, created hundreds of drawings. He drew a variety of masked clowns, stage sets, and surrealist portraits. In 1926, Lorca exhibited his work at a gallery in Barcelona with the help of his friend, Salvador Dali. Sylvia Plath was actually originally, like Joni Mitchell, a visual artist. She enrolled at Smith College to study the visual arts and switched to English only at the urging of her professors. Her art was never recognized in her lifetime. However, in 2017, the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery held a retrospective of her work. She also did satiric collages. William Blake was, of course, a famous painter. Before becoming a celebrated troubadour, Leonard Cohen produced poignant, sadly humorous illustrations of beautiful women, bits of nature, and sketches of his own furrowing, aging self still appear in his poetry books today. E. E. Cummings devoted tremendous time to his painting and wrote extensively on form and color theories and on the intelligence of painting. He worked in caricature and representational oils. Bukowski produced more than 1,000 paintings using various mediums. And of course, my favorite, Joni Mitchell, of course, who spoke of moving from medium to medium as crop rotation, which I think is just really a great way to describe sort of the need to sort of regenerate. So Whitman was not lying when he said we contain multitudes. So without further ado, here to talk about their relationship with other art forms tonight, we have Mary Margaret Alvarado, who goes by Mia. Mia is the author of Hey Folly by Dos Madres, a book of poems. Her nonfiction and poetry have been published in the Iowa Review, Boston Review, America Outside, VQR, The Point, The Rumpus. I love Rumpus, Beloit, Georgia Review, Kenyon Review, and elsewhere. And she's twice been in Best American. She was an Iowa Arts Fellow and Provost Postgraduate Writing Fellow at the University of Iowa, where she earned her MFA. Her debut novel is represented by Annie DeWitt of the Shipman Agency. She goes by her nickname, Mia. Mia's most recent project is painting murals featuring short poems by women in an effort to create a walkable chapbook. I love this idea and would really like to bring it up in my little town of Palisade and see if they might be interested in something like that. I love looking at the ones that you're doing, and we'll be talking about that as we go tonight. We also have Kyle Harvey. Kyle is all over the arts map. He's a poet, a documentary filmmaker, a photographer, a graphic designer, and a musician. He was a finalist for the Colorado Book Award and winner of the Mark Fisher Prize. Most recently, he edited Coolidge and Tchaikovsky in Conversation, and his collection, Cosmographies, is forthcoming from Cuneiform. I say Cuneiform, is that right? Does anybody know? We don't know. I think Sommer also has a book out from Cuneiform. Yeah. As a musician, Kyle has been fortunate to share the stage with Bright Eyes, Frank Black of the Pixies, Daniel Johnston, Spoon, David Rawlings, Ben Queller, The Faint, and many more. His most recent documentary film, It's Nice to Be With You Always, a film about Neely Tchaikovsky, premiered at the 2020 Omaha Film Festival. He lives with his wife and kids in Fruita, Colorado, where he designs books for Lithic Press. And then we've got Sommer Browning. Sommer is a poet, a writer, a curator, and a visual artist. Her latest book is Good Actors, Birds, LLC. She's the author of 2 other collections of poetry, Backup Singers, and Either Way I'm Celebrating, as well as the artist book, The Circle Book, Cuneiform Press, and the joke book, You're on My Period. I can't say it without laughing. I love that. She founded Georgia, an art space in her garage in Denver. Her poetry, art, writing, and visual art have appeared in Lit Hub, Bomb, Jubilat, Chicago Review, Entropy, the American Poetry Review, and elsewhere. Sommer is also a librarian, not the typical archetypal interests of a librarian. So welcome to all 3 of you. We're going to start with Mia. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put out a question for each one of you. When we come around to you, you'll sort of respond to the question that I've put out, and then introduce yourself by reading or reciting a poem for us. So for this first round, I wanted to ask each one of you what exactly it is that you say when people ask you, what do you do? because you wear so many hats, and because it's such an awkward question for poets, and often an awkward question for artists in general. So how do you respond to that perennial question? What do you do? And then if you could share a poem with us. So we'll go ahead and start with Mia.
I actually feel like least able to say I'm a poet of this crowd. Poetry is my first love and my first love of language for absolute sure. I've been writing prose mostly for quite a few years now. And no one ever asks me what I do. I mean, if I'm at my job, I'll say my job title. The last 5 years, I was the thesis specialist at Colorado College. Next year, I'm called an innovator in residence, which makes my husband laugh at. I'm very evidently like a mother of children regularly, and people just let me know what they think about that with their eye movements or whatever. So I don't have a really good answer. I do a lot of community stuff. Like I love that Sommer started Georgia in her garage. I do things like that too, perhaps with less success, but I'm forever doing like, movable micro granting DIY feast type stuff. I do mean to like serve arts with my life. So, I'm supposed to read a poem and stop talking, right? Okay, that'll be a relief for everybody. Okay, this poem's called It Startles. Who can punctuate it? Wife. The unplantable blacktops in the past of my wife, the hurricaned petals, the combustible joints of wife, my wife getting naked under stars in a car, the chiseled and serif typeface of wife, the radiance, her fancies, and a house whose root is my life, dusky, sometimes a lioness sleeping, taking dictation for briefs, courting in malls gone to seed. What astonishes who? Currents, Cooper's wife, forbearance, life. We refuse the agents of mansionization, my wife. We put the palm chakras over the eyes which eat light. Yet we never rolled a rug and played a gramophone, and we never bit the sugar knuckle to the sugar bone. Wife, you say you saw the hook and carcass swing in the door. Tell how we took a bus to the beach to watch the cook fires go. The waves were mushy, the dark fettered down. Are pictographs better? Is archness the answer? Bonnie, ennui, to do it without the assistance of machines, among pleas. For a time, wife and I, we were festively clothed. The flung stony planets made wishes on us. Blinking wife, think life is past.
Thank you, dear.
Mm-hmm.
This poem, when you sent it to me, it really struck me how loaded the word wife is. I remember a book, I think it was, I'm not sure who wrote it. It was called The Good Wife. Does anybody remember that novel? Of course, it was, an ironic title. So the thing that really strikes me about this poem is how every time the word wife is used, we feel that it's being put on us, and that we're also recognizing in others this idea of the wife. And then there's this word husbandry. It occurs to me that there may not be sort of an equivalent. Is there such a word as wifery? I don't know. Could you tell us a little bit more about the poem?
I think I was also just, I was having a lot of fun with like when a word becomes essentially a musical note, like what you can do with it, and the particular sound of wife, and then the argument of a rhyme of wife and life rhyming multiple times. So it's also very much a poem. It's, like all love poems about life. Yeah, and was just sort of deliciously tumbling with that sound. I also was, that was a time in my life when I wrote it, when I was walking around saying that Gertrude Stein a lot to myself, the sweet, 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 sweet tea, Susie Asado, you know, just like what happens when you get the music of a word, and then like how many times you maul it and change it, what happens.
Mhm.
And then also I guess I've always loved, you know, this is also kind of like a composite love poem. And then if there can be such a thing, I'm sure they can. I've also always loved like gender swaps in cover songs, you know, sung with all earnestness by like you know, so I was thinking about that too. Yeah, and like the different sort of register that happens.
Yeah, yeah, that happened when I was reading it to myself too, where I was almost sort of substituting the word life for wife. And it did become one of those moments where the word, the sound of it becomes nonsensical. And like a musical note that it, you know, it's kind of, you're playing with the meaning of the word and then allowing the word to lose meaning and then sort of, you know, be sort of reborn almost. It's a fascinating piece. Thanks for sharing that.
Of course.
All right. Let's move on to Kyle. Kyle, the question was, how do you respond when people ask you what you do? Which one of those hats comes, you know, to mind? And then if you can share a piece with us, please.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on the situation, but generally I panic and try to find the door out. But I think I was trying to remember if it was Ted Berrigan that talks about in one of his interviews, you know, being on an airplane and the guy next to him saying, you know, what do you do for a living? And he said, I'm a poet. And then kind of follows up with, you want to hear a poem, you know, and which nobody does. But it's funny that you asked that question because I've been repairing an old xylophone from like the 1960s. And I went to the hardware store yesterday morning and was looking for some really obscure pieces. And the guy asked, you know, what are you doing with all this stuff? Are you crafting or something? And I said, no, I'm repairing a xylophone. He said, is that what you do for a living? And I said, no, I'm a poet. And just the glazed over look was priceless. All right. This poem is called Western Suite for All of Life's Mysteries. And it has an epigraph from our old friend, Jack Mueller. Stay solid in the mystery. Jack, I don't know what to say. Time was not time and mind was not. Light was not, nor darkness. My dreams haven't always been wrong, Jack. It was 4:32 a.m. and the creek was rising. The bridge was washed out, Jack, and it was mostly silent, if not for the faint cries of the saints and the fays and their cries. And Jack, we were sitting in your car, and your car wouldn't start. It started to snow. We were cold, and you suggested we rub two words together until they make fire. Jack, I don't know what to say. Silence is my mother tongue, Jack, and song my second language. Lorca was my grandmother, and his mother's mother was the song itself. The song itself was something else. A river, a lover, the myth of whatever. What I wouldn't do to die for forever. Wrap myself in the light of a feather, warp myself into the good of my father. He once left me in the woods at dusk, Jack. What is the color of night, Jack? Please don't tell me Bible black. I passed over Celia through the dark halls of the mollusk. At the top of the stairs, there were more stairs, and at the top of those stairs, there were more stairs. Cecilia, you're breaking my heart. You're shaking my confidence daily. Daily, I am born again, disoriented into domestica. Always at the top of the stairs, there are more stairs. Nerval always winds his tight spiral, fevers his way into extraordinary magnitudes, obsessively loves his way. Jack, I don't know what to say. Yesterday, there was an ocean. Now it's gone. Every house is filled with years, every year filled with sadness. We light no small fire to keep our pipes from freezing. We sing no insignificant song to keep our hearts thawed. Let me fall asleep in this poem. Let me wake from this dream and into another.
Lovely. Yeah. So what I'm really loving about actually this whole collection, Kyle, we often say that poetry is the big conversation. And this collection really feels that that conversation coming to life. There's also this sense of intimacy when you keep repeating the person's name, because that's what we do in conversation when we're really, intensifying a moment. And so there's this wonderful feeling of, sort of mentor, mentee, and this kind of philosophic, poetic sort of interlude. Julie says, xylophone repairman is a good answer. When somebody asks you what you do.
I'm going to use that from here on out.
I think it sounds great. I mean, it's just might as well.
Yeah. If you know anybody that needs a repair, let me know.
Yeah. So let me ask you this about this piece and really about the collection as a whole, Kyle. And that is, how did you, it feels like there's a weaving going on here. Is that what you felt that you were doing? And did it feel sort of collage-like? And in a sense, isn't it kind of like, playing with different mediums where you're just sort of selecting and then going down this road and down this little rabbit hole? And was it a different process for you writing this way than your sort of standard lyric poem mode?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I do often, I mean, I know it's almost cliche to say it, I think, these days, but I do think of my poems as sort of a collage in a way. And I definitely sort of, I do borrow from conversations, with Jack, for example, and collage that into the work or fold that into the work. And I do think that I approach it a little bit differently. I know a lot of times I also write songs, and people always say, oh, you're a songwriter. That's, that's the same as being a poet. And I've always thought they're very, very different. And my songs, for the most part, I think, have kind of a little bit more of a traditional form and kind of a narrative element to them that's a little more straightforward. Whereas I think poems have the opportunity to use greater leaps of imagination to kind of paint their picture, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think songwriting, well, I mean, I think that specifically you tend to do like a kind of like a ballad form when you're doing songwriting, where
Mhm.
poems have a different kind of imaginative leap.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thanks, Kyle. All right, next we've got Sommer. Welcome, Sommer.
Thank you.
There you are.
Hi, good to be here. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for paying attention to us out there. What do you do? I think I say I am mostly a poet. I say I'm mostly a poet, and then but the dreaded question is, what kind of poetry do you write? And
That's true.
that one is
That's worse. Yeah.
yeah. It's like, oh, religious limericks, or it makes you want to just fuck with people. So
It really does.
then I just stumble around. I really, I've done this for 20 years. You'd think I'd have an answer, but I try to be funny, and I try to have a lot of people in my poems, and there's like dialogue, and it's free verse. I don't know. I just say this string of whatever comes to my head at the moment. But it took me a long time to even just say poet, and I mean I do have to say mostly a poet, because it just feels something which I've always thought about poetry, that it has this, like, right now in this era, this kind of arch kind of nuance to it, which I don't think it should. because literally almost everyone has written a poem if you kind of dig a little deeper, you know, so, but yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, a poem, yes, okay.
Because you're mostly a poet.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'm gonna mostly read this. It's called Good Actors. I want to make a movie before I turn 45 about two characters exchanging money. I give them directions. I say to them earnestly, as if holding grilled cheeses, they push the money into each other's hands. I call out reluctantly. They look down and say, God damn it, this is the last time, Ray, and weave it between their fingers. They are good actors, so I say hopefully. They blink and gaze into their hands like into a new baby. Angrily, I say, they gnaw the money to confetti. I tell them as if in mourning, and the money fevers down their wrists. And now, like a bank, they fist and throw it like garbage. And a forest, now a forest, like seed, they sow it. You're doing very well, I say. They drop it at my feet. Exuberantly, I say. They remove their clothing. Lovingly, I say. They move toward me. They are such good actors. They turn off the camera.
I absolutely adore this poem because you can get such poignancy with humor. And it also, the first time I read this, I thought, this is the way that somebody who makes, films or directs, thinks. Like this is the direction I'm going to give them. And I also love how you sort of tend to save your poetic chops for the sort of middle of the poem where you come to this moment. Well, first they gnaw the money to confetti when you tell them to do it angrily. I just love that. And it really gave me a feeling of what it would be like to be an actor. And I've never really, wondered, like when I get on stage and I perform poems, I kind of sometimes feel like there's something similar. But for somebody to give you a direction, like hand somebody money angrily, like, God damn it, this is the last time, Ray. Like these moments are just so specific and so, sort of like a door opening to the mind of, the director, really. And then, that there's this poetic language really starts to reach a peak. The money fevers down their wrists, and now like a bank, and they fist and throw it like garbage. And a forest, like seed, they sow it. So well done. I really appreciate it. So how did you come by this? What was your sort of impetus there?
I mean, I have a problem with money, I hate it, but you need it, and it's very complicated. And I love movies and I love film. And so this whole book and sort of what I've been thinking about for years sort of now is making movies and writing screenplays or writing plays, writing dialogue, and then just our roles. I have at the moment probably 150 roles that I'm inhabiting, from mother to librarian to boss to lover to, I don't have anyone to love at the moment. So if you're free out there, but, and, friend and sister, and I mean, 1,000 things, bitch, whatever. And, so I don't know, all that sort of came together and I was sort of, imagining, yeah, you're right, just directing a movie. And I've never been a good actor. When I've tried, I think I was second shepherd in a play in middle school, and it was excruciating. And like the same, I feel like if someone was to give me a direction, I couldn't do it. I mean, I could perform my own work, but so how is that different than all the roles that we have just naturally in life that we sort of seem to ease into pretty pretty easy. So I don't know. I sort of just, started thinking about that, and then it went. It went as, good. When you feel good and you're writing, it just goes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And you're
It
just
has
like
that feeling that it
2
was just
hours later, like, what happened?
right. Well, and it's sort of almost like a litany or a list. It just, this way, that way, this way, that way. And then this clever little ending where, they turn away from the camera. Really nice moment there too. So I think that was a great way to introduce yourselves with those poems. All of those poems are moving in different ways. And so for the next round, and we'll go in the same order. So we had Mia, and then Kyle, and then Sommer. And for the second round, if you could just talk a little bit about creative process and how you kind of, like, when you have an idea, and we all know what this is like, that there's an idea, it's gnawing at you. Sometimes it's difficult to know sort of what form it's going to take. Is it going to be a poem? Is it going to be a novel? Is it going to be a piece of nonfiction, a piece of a film? And so talk a little bit about how you come to the form that you come to. And then I'm going to ask each of you to show off your screen sharing skills and share with us a couple of, 3 or 4 pieces, and talk about, how you came to those particular pieces too. And if you'd like to throw in a poem this round too, choose a shorter one, because we've got so much conversation too. All right, let's start with Mia.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
If I'm in the children's playroom, I can like wander the house if you guys, if I'm breaking up. I love that question because I do write all, and I should have just said earlier, I would say I was a writer, but
Yeah, you are breaking up.
I am.
Yeah.
Okay.
For me,
You
is
guys,
it for everybody?
Yeah, it's not so much the volume, it feels like it's a connection issue.
okay, let me move. You guys okay walking for a second?
Okay.
I'll walk and tell you my answer, okay? Any messes in the house, just whatever.
We'll judge you harshly.
Okay. What's that?
We'll judge you for any mess.
Okay. That question is for her because I do write. Can you hear me better? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I write, essays and poems and fiction, and so for me, like, the distinction between an essay and a poem would be, is it essentially, is it like essay as, to try, to test, to weigh, to make an attempt? Is it sort of idea driven? So I have written like lineated essays that some people have called poems, but for me, it's what's the impulse behind it. Now you can hear people doing the dishes. Apologies. Yeah, and then with, like, when you said, where do we get inspiration from, Wendy? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the thing that I've been working on most is this novel that it was 100,000 words. Now it's like 90,000 words. It keeps, moving around. But I mean, I would say just obsessions, probably like everybody, just what are you obsessed with? What do you have to, like, you can't not think about it. And I think anybody I know who is a writer, like, the longer they keep at it, the truer that is, because any success or any reward outside of the work is hugely conditional and very fickle. And can you call it fickle? I don't know. You know what I mean? So yeah, what am I obsessed with? What can I not, like, think about and lend myself to? And then when I write essays, I write a lot of lyric essays, and there is often a shared impulse with poetry for me, in the sense of, I really love nonce forms. I love, like, the constraint of form, and I love messing with form. And so I do love, in something I take from poetry into essays, is I love setting myself a rule. Like, I just wrote an essay in the Georgia Review that the whole thing is questions and there's one sentence. So that was the rule I'd given myself. Yeah, so form in essays, and then, like, usually if I write long form nonfiction, it's because I'm usually mad.
Mm-hmm.
Like I often will research out of anger. Like I'm like, Corey's on this call, and Corey and I are collaborating on a long essay I wrote about gun violence, and Corey is doing these incredible works of art that show guns being disassembled and turned into garden tools. And yeah, I wrote that essay out of just like, I was just mad.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think agitation is a great inspiration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you wanted us to screen share. What?
Yes, if you
Or
could
what?
share some of those murals.
Sure. Yeah. So here we go. Let's see. So the murals, yeah, it's not like my most recent project. It's a project I do. I've been doing it on and off for years. And this is the most recent one. So the junior high I went to, I live back near it. The only thing they had on the wall forever was like drug free. And I felt like that was like a bummer, like one bit of like public art for the kids. So my most recent one is across from the junior high. And if you guys haven't read Gwendolyn Brooks's like fabulous book of poems for kids, this poem is from that book. And I do love rules. So the rules I've set for myself with this little project is it's all in hand lettered Helvetica, and it's all short poems by women. And they're usually not like the best known short poems by women. So I adore Emily Dickinson, but like, you know, I haven't done her. Yeah, that's a great book by Gwendolyn Brooks. So now let's see, can I move things? Yeah, so a fun little side note about this blue stripe was just whatever colors I had left over at the end. And then two very sweet teenagers showed up on the last day out paint. We painted that. And then the district like took it as a color. Someone in facilities color matched it, and it like stripes around this whole giant windowless building, which makes me happy. So that's the most recent one. And I'm supposed to paint some more this year. Don't worry, this thing's gonna move. This is us, me and a friend, tracing the Helvetica. So I do some of this stuff as freehand, like, you know, the background of Marian Anderson was freehand. And then the picture, I drew that picture of her and then traced it on the wall. That way there can be a community aspect of people kind of color booking. And yeah, something I'm obsessed with to probably no good end whatsoever is just what happens if you take anything made by a machine and put it back into human hand form. So like, I love what happens to Helvetica when you trace it and it gets, you know, kind of screwed up. The one in the bottom right-hand corner is in process. It's called Bathroom Still Life. And the poem is from Shannon Burns' love poem, Where Are All the Medium-Sized Towels? I Love You. And part of what was fun doing that was people would just walk by as like the city's last corner grocery store, and they'd laugh out loud, which was really beautiful to see. All these people are like, that's a great poem. You can see a little, there's me painting it with a small person helping me. And you can see like, I drew, or maybe you can't see. Yeah, I drew, you know, this bottle, there's a detail in it. So the very first one of these, you know, a couple of people know this story. I think it's kind of hilarious. The very first one, I just wanted it to appear like randomly in the town. Okay, I'll read you this one. Now my hair is all different. What does this mean? Oh, I don't know. Mountains and light, mountains and light. And that's on the side of a barber shop. And it kind of gets to Sommer's point too about like, you know, the rarefied air around poetry is obviously problematic in a number of ways, but like, it was such a joy to just hang out with the guy who owns this barbershop. And I brought him all these short poems by women, and he really loved this one. This one offhand, I was just like, I can't move the gutter, so I'll just mess with the gutter, and you can see the letters there. And then the first one is kind of a disaster, but it's a fond memory. But it is a funny story now. I was trying to paint a giant picture of our cat on the side of a parking garage, mostly to cheer my children up about America, which they're not actually as upset about parking garages as I am. But anyway, it has this beautiful Mirka Rekola poem, and I love her. And I feel like we shall be talking about her all the time. But the funny story is the United States Air Force destroyed it.
Of course.
Not a good story. It's kind of a good story. They were doing a block cleanup and they like sandblasted the mural away. So that one wasn't signed. The idea was that they would just show up and whatever. And I did end up like getting to talk. They were like volunteering, and the guy was like, well, you'd never registered it, the Air Force guy. I'd obviously asked the permission of the people who owned the parking garage and stuff.
Yeah.
So that was a screen share. Should I stop it now?
I think these are wonderful. I can't read the poems on my screen. Can you read that one? That's the Gwendolyn Brooks.
Sure. When I hear Marian Anderson sing, I am a stuffless kind of thing. Heart is like the flying air. I cannot find it anywhere. Fingers tingle. I am cold and warm and young and very old. But most I am a stuffless thing when I hear Marian Anderson sing.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I think that this idea of, just bringing poetry to the streets and, bringing it to the people, instead of sort of like taking art out of the museum. And it's just this is such a brilliant idea. I've just, my mind is going in a million different directions, thinking about how to get some kind of grant and, all of that. But you also clearly can paint and draw.
Yeah, I love to draw and I love to paint, and I don't think of it as anything official at all, which is maybe why I love to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been like a person who doodled, and I'm actually supposed to be drawing maps for my novel right now, and that's been a fun, weird assignment to like look at maps and try to figure out how maps are drawn. Yeah, I drew a weird little visual essay the last few years about machines I understand in my house without any recourse to study. Like there's very few of them. I was trying to kind of perform my own primitivism. But yeah, I love to draw. I don't think of myself as an artist, but I love to draw.
Well, I love the idea because I was wondering how you were getting the text, the typing to look like that. So you just took like a projector and just...
Yeah, if you, people will just give them away. So it was also just messing with that Helvetica. I haven't like fact checked this in the last year or something, but for a long time, it's been the most commonly used typeface on earth. And it's used, primarily either for commerce or utility. So messing with that.
Right. And did you choose the places based on where there were good walls or based on where there was a lot of walking sort of traffic? How did you?
Yeah, I started like in my own neighborhood, and the idea was to make a walkable, bikeable chapbook. Like what would it be to be in, to walk the pages of a book, and also, increase walkability and bikeability. And then, I ask people permission to use the walls. I don't do super high. I don't like to do like multiple scaffoldings. And I like to have access to running water to, wash brushes. So those are the main things.
Oh my gosh, I just think this is such a brilliant idea. I hope anybody watching is thinking they could do it in their community. People in the chat are saying, such interesting work. I love this so much. The art is so very cool. And so, yeah, this is just, I always think that the thing about poetry is that it's almost like ghettoized. Like we put it off into a whole nother thing and it doesn't go and have any communication with the other arts. And this is just a really cool way to put the visual arts with the written word and really have an impact. I'm just so impressed with this. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to Kyle.
Yeah, so I think I'm trying to think, Mia, first of all, that was incredible. That's super inspiring. I think Wendy, the original question was, how do what inspires us to make something? Is that kind of?
Well, I'm kind of curious to know how it is that, so you have an idea and it's kind of percolating, but you're not sure in what form it's going to sort of appear, we have so many things at our disposal. Like it could be a lyric poem, it could be a song, it could be a photograph, it could be a film, it could be, a mural. There's just so many different, ways. And
Yeah.
so, Mia was saying that sometimes it's like, if it's idea driven, then she knows she's going to go in with prose, or if she, you know, it's imagery driven, it might be a lyric poem, you know.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Well, I'd say like I'm fairly similar to what Joni Mitchell said with crop rotation. I sort of have lots of irons in the fire, and kind of whatever I'm obsessing over, as Mia said, like when I obsess over something, I go all the way. And that's like with my filmmaking. I had never made a film before. Like Sommer, I liked films and wanted to make documentaries, but never had. And sort of had asked our friend Jack, who I read the poem about, while he was still alive. I asked him many times, like, hey, can I make a film about you, do some interviews with you? And he always said, I don't want that. And then when he was in the hospital dying, he said, okay, you can make that film. You should go talk to these people, and gave me a list of names in San Francisco. And so that I was kind of off to the races, and taught myself how to do that sort of stuff, all the editing, and bought some cameras, and went out there with audio gear, and backpacked around the city with, 60 pounds worth of video filming equipment, and made it happen. But like the most recent thing that I've been on fire about is an idea that I've had since I was probably 21, 22. I was always making sort of sound collage, ambient 4-track recordings in my apartments and things while I was in my early 20s, and had the idea that I wanted to do a sound installation at an art gallery that would be a 24-hour straight sound collage. And my friend's opening a gallery here in Fruta, and so I pitched the idea to him, and we're off to the races, and it's scheduled. And I've got like all this stuff behind me as kind of, synthesizers and reel-to-reel tape machines, and all kinds of spacey type sounding equipment. So I just go all the way when I get into something. I don't know, in terms of screen sharing, I had the idea that I was going to share a trailer to a film, but I don't know, does the audio come through if I share my screen?
Well, we'll let you know if it does.
Okay. I'm going to try it then here. Yeah, give me just a second while I pull it up. I'm sorry, I'm not super good at this. I'm better with analog. Okay. Share screen.
And I don't mean to be self-righteous, I'm just being real. It's what I saw, what I experienced, and that's what a poet does. See?
In the last few days, my poems have changed. And most poets I know actually tend to like the things they've written just now better. I think so,
Basically, to be hyper means you can't concentrate for any real amount of time. Hyper is you're on the bus, you're sitting there, you have to move, all these things, and it's a burden. I think poetry works towards sincerity. I don't think it necessarily works toward the truth, but it works toward an idea of the truth. It works toward a conception of trying to say things that hold true. But to say that poetry is about truth, I don't think I can say that. Nor is it about beauty. I think what I like is when I go, is to find a cafe in one of those old cities like I talked about. This time it'll be way up in the sky, and you can sit there. And the thing is, you never get bored. If you get bored, it's not heaven. Then maybe it's purgatory. And if you get too bored, it's like hell. But if you're sitting there and having one cappuccino after another and everything's just fine for eternity. That sounds cool.
Well, the sickness hasn't left me, don't know why. If my health does not come back, I'm gonna die. Here comes my ride. It's not that fast and
I
Wonderful.
think that kind of worked. I don't know.
It really did. Yeah. I
Okay.
love seeing the early footage of him, his face, my goodness.
Oh yeah, he's such a beautiful dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know that, like that, for example, that I made that's the second film that I did. And it kind of was an offshoot of the first film that I made about our friend Jack. And Neely was somebody that I interviewed for that first film. And while I was staying with him and kind of in his world for a few days, I was like, this would be a really cool documentary to make. He's an amazing poet and just such a fun person to be around. So that was the next one, just kind of off to the races on that one. So
Yeah. Once you get going, then you got to do it again.
right.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I'm glad the audio worked because
Yeah, me too.
his face is one thing, but what he says too. I mean, he's fabulous.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. I hate to say this, but we're only 15 minutes left. So we got to move on. These things go so quickly. It's just astonishing. So let's move on to Sommer.
Hi, yeah, you two are amazing. I'm inspired. But yeah, so how do I choose? I don't know. So I love thinking, and I love when I have an interesting idea in my mind. I think that's when I'm most happiest. And then when I'm trying to like work, like I'll think, oh, that's a funny situation. How can I turn that into a joke? Or oh, I overhear a conversation and I'm like, that just those two sentences is a poem. Or I don't know, there's something that's imbued in the thing that perks my interest that then guides me towards the medium. So I'm not sure. Some it's mysterious. And so, but I do know that a different part of my brain is activated. Like when I sit down and write a comic, and it's something. I think Mia said something. It was that when it's a different mode, like you don't know what you're doing, and it's freeing or something. I don't know. Like you're painting, you said something like, "I don't care about it," so maybe that's why I love it, or something like this. So yeah, I don't have that same internal editor when I'm doing some of the things that I feel very talentless at. And that is great and fun, So I'm not sure. I sort of listen to the inspiration and it feels kinship with some kind of medium.
Mhm.
And then that's the avenue it goes to. But yeah, so we don't have time. I'll share my comics here.
Okay.
See that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are jokes in comics, and my friend Amber Cobb, who's an artist here in Denver, asked me to do something for a group show at Red Line Gallery in town, and I've always so something that Mia said too, this like idea of like painting text and then font and by hand, so it's like this weird bridging of analog digital, like human form and machine form is something really funny and subversive about that I like. And so in my first book of poetry, I have a lot of comics in there. You can't probably see this one comic here, but to me, I was sort of thinking this highbrow, lowbrow crossover, and that to raise the level of comics to that of poetry, and to like bring poetry down to like the vulgar and like in your face kind of medium of comics. I was trying to like do that, which like Joe Brainerd was a big inspiration for that, and his work with Ron Padgett. And there's like a long history actually of comics and poetry, cartoons and poetry that I love. And I just talked with Paulo Javier, who is a poet, and his latest book on Night Boat, he worked with a couple of comic book artists, and it's a great book. It's called OBB, and we talked about just our love of comics and how and when and why, and does it ever cross over into poetry. So this is a picture of, I didn't make up all these jokes. I don't even know if I made up any of them, but in like 2016 or something, I had the opportunity to make a joke museum. And this is something that maybe like Kyle, like I've been obsessed with since I was probably in my 20s. Like I want to make a joke museum so bad. And this time it was just a pop-up at City Park Jazz, which is like the free jazz in the city on Sundays, every Sunday in the summer. And my friends who run Counterpath Press, and they also have an art space, community space. It's also a food bank. It's this really wild kind of idea. They had a tent there, like next to like the tie-dye t-shirts and the very other crowd-pleasing for sale items. But they would have crazy dancers in there, or they'd have people doing a seance, and they would have, very odd, like, you're like, what's that? That's weird. Taken aback sort of thing. So anyway, I did a joke museum in there. And what I did is just string 200, 300 jokes around this tent that were like flapping in the wind. And then I had 3 installations of like joke artifacts. So there was the chicken that crossed the road, and it was like on a pedestal, like, and then there was a banana peel, of course, like these classic joke props presented as if they were in a museum. It was great fun. And Mia too, like the best part was watching people interact and laughing at it. And you're just like sitting back and you're just like, man, I just made joy in that person's life. Like, cannot think of a better feeling. But yeah, I like to write jokes a lot, and there's like a lot of crossover with poetry. I think that concision and the forcing yourself to really pay attention to every single word is just great. And then Wendy, I don't know why you chose this one for me to show, but this one's just a silly comic that I drew, which is, I guess existential or absurd or whatever you want to.
This one to me is one of the most poetic. I mean, the margarita flavored neti pot is really poetic to me as well. But I mean, what really strikes me is that, like, I look at like a Robin Williams, and I always thought this guy is a poet. He has a poet's sensibility. He can't help it. He can't help the way that he's observing the world. And the poet and the comic are both really paying attention to language. And this one I love because, I mean, at my next event, I'm going to have to pass out little stickers because the things that people could put in there is brilliant. I mean, I would love to be handed, I hate it when they want you to wear a name tag, but if somebody handed me that, I could have so much fun, just filling out what my name is not. I think it was Mark Twain who said, humor is serious business. There is not enough of it in poetry. And this is what I love about this panel tonight, is that there's humor in all of your work. And then Summer comes along and just takes it to a whole nother level. Like, this was a woman who's writing joke books. Like, who's doing that? Who does that? So I'm really impressed.
Ridiculous. It's a ridiculous endeavor.
Well, somebody's got to do it, right? So we just have a few more minutes, but let's do another round. None of you read your own poems this last round, so let's go ahead and share another poem before we have to close out for the night. Let's start with Mia.
Sure, I'll just read the one that goes after the one I just read. This one's called Place of Refuge. The concrete of the future will hum with light, pooled into substantial sheets, translucent, 1/10 of 1 inch thick. It is 11:46 in the morning. It is 5:13 in the morning. A person is swimming to us on a person raft. Silos, silos, sunset, sunset. The first vet on oxygen keeps yelling to the other. A person is like a glacier. I can't even see him. I have this bandage on my eyes for the awe. It pools, becomes substantial. We row out in our boats and are cold. I am not even talking about the harlequin mantis shrimp or a snow cube caked in pitch. This has nothing to do with the ruby stalks we left behind or the hue of a voice that was lost. Stop already with the business about ink spots on old hands. Under no circumstances will we discuss the sudden alterations of a white hot plate extracted from a kiln or the mirages that drip feelingly from so-called office parks. I have one thing to say, and I can't even say it. It's like how the marching band crowds down our block out of uniform and acmeed, radiant as day. One motley flag girl drags her flag, one sad flag girl just whirls and whirls. The cascading body of the boy on the edge carries only the instrument of the body, the boy. They hover in a quality of light so precise. Strands of chlorophyll shimmer at their legs struck triangles, stomping.
Yeah, powerful. When you said before that you like to, play with form and you like with nonce forms, and that making a rule, I can imagine, because for myself, I know that particularly with really difficult subjects, it helps to have some kind of a limitation or a restriction so that you can bounce up against it, because to not have that is, where do you begin?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you continue with it? Did you have yourself any rules for this one, and how did you approach?
I mean, I would just want to say yes to what you said, first of all. My daughter came home from school today and put on Perry Como, Hello Young Lovers on the record player. Mm-hmm. And I've just been like, we have like 20 records, and then over here Spotify. And I just love that she's decided Hello Young Lovers is like the after school music. And point being, like, I feel like this is sort of the dis-ease of living in the internet, is like, there's no restraint, like there's no form, it's like this formless thing that we're all in, and it creates pain, I think, a little bit, whereas like a form creates a different pain, but it can be delightful and liberating. And it's like the whole thing why people are, like they wonder like why great art is made under like terrifying regimes at times or something. That's maybe a little bit off topic, but I'm trying to say yes to your idea. With that poem, I had not given myself a rule. I was a lot of the little, like the motion was the rule, and it was just something I was doing with lines, how to get from one line to the next, and kind of the quality of slip between the lines, basically. Mm-hmm. And the reason I like picked that one, if we're just doing one more, is a lot of my poems have an ekphrastic impulse, and so with this whole conversation with visual art, and I had been this was what a time in my life when I had more time to do this kind of reading. I'd been reading this whole thing about innovative uses of concrete and like
Mhm.
this, you know, all these forms of concrete that you actually can see light through. It was in this kind of utopian architecture book, like the concrete of the future will pulse with light. You know, that was probably like basically just a lifted idea. And then the rest kind of slipped from there. And then, yeah, and then there were other like ekphrastic and synesthetic impulses in that poem too, just from life, beautiful things happening in life, including like a mildly transcendent experience chaperoning a dance at the deaf and blind school down the block. So, you know, but I
Wow.
agree. Form, yeah, form is
Mm.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, people say, you know, like, I think that free verse is a misnomer. I mean, anybody who really works in free verse knows that they're creating some kind of something to bounce up against.
Well, and I think it's why like lots of poets are so good at Twitter. I'm terrible at Twitter, but like, you know, like Sommer uses it well. Mark Leidner like is clearly using Twitter like as like a poetic form. And it's actually part of why I didn't touch Twitter for forever, because it is to me like a fixed form. So
Mhm.
it's like there's this like kind of compulsion there I can see with like filling the form, breaking the form, inverting the
Yeah.
form, whatever in the form. But
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, those who are good at it are really good at it. I feel that's true of all social media, that, you know, there might be a 1,000 people out there that are just doing the same thing, but those who know how to work within the confines of whatever social media and do it well, I follow them to the ends of the earth.
yeah,
Thanks so much, Mia.
thank you.
All right. Let's see, Kyle. The innovative uses of concrete. Yeah, that's really an interesting phrase. All right, Kyle.
Wendy, you're not gonna like this. I'm gonna throw a curveball.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm just gonna I wanted to read a short poem, and I don't have a whole lot of short poems in the book. But I'm gonna read a poem called Five Themes. I wrote it for Jim Dine, who is a painter, photographer, poet, printmaker. What else does he do? He does assemblage works, does all kinds of different stuff. And I've just always found his work to be pretty exciting. And so it just seems kind of appropriate for a conversation about somebody that works in lots of different mediums. But Five Themes for Jim Dine. Red robe, teal mallet, yellow-handled saw, blue hammer, tricky teeth. Nancy was appalled. Red heart, a pair of gloves, onion number 12, black eyes, New York City, heliogravure, rose and gray. I felt this way all the way along. That's it.
That's lovely. That's lovely.
Thanks.
I'm not going to scold you for going off script. No, the only reason I like to see the poems beforehand is so that I can actually hear them.
No, I
'Cause,
know. I
yeah,
know.
sometimes it's hard, yeah.
I just didn't want to make us go over by reading, another 5-page poem or something.
Right. All of a sudden it goes, dark.
Right.
Thanks, Kyle.
Yep.
All right, Sommer. And you are muted. There you go.
I just have this 5-page poem, so I hope that's okay. Great things from the Department of Transportation. My mother desires to track my location on her phone. My mother announces that she's latex intolerant. My mother is horrified that the children's cartoon character Caillou is bald. My mother to the server at a terrible restaurant, I don't want a box, I want a flamethrower. One's mother might be the most famous person one knows. My mother says, there is no Denny's, only Zool. My mother on penises and traffic cones. On occasion, they're both orange, aren't they? The young lungs of my mother fill with fine particulate matter on the streets of Clareton, PA. One night in the 1970s in the Mojave Desert, my mother ceases to feel apart from the world. My mother pays my sister and me $40 each to not have birthday parties. My mother's soulmate is not my father, but her dog, Six. The only thing I don't like about John Wick is that he never washes his hair. My mother's father, a bipolar beer distributor, laughs at least once that I know of because it echoes through me for 40 years. On the whole, my mother likes Miranda July's novel, The First Bad Man, but could have done without the sex parts. I listen to my mother tell my child a story as if I were my own daughter. My mother tells me there were some skanks on America's Next Top Model. My mother asks, didn't someone famous say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger? My mother prays for her children every night. My mother prays for children every night. I bet you never thought you'd marry, have a baby, and get divorced before you're 40, she tells me. My mother expects great things from the Department of Transportation.
You know, this is, I mean, I just love it when something, I mean, you just have that urge to cry and laugh together. And to me, that is just the ultimate. I really appreciate that poem because I've been trying to write my own quintessential mother poem for so long, and it's so hard. And again, you know, you put a limitation, or you impose a particular kind of form. Like this is another one that's kind of like a list. And yet that list, you can really play with what you're doing with that list. It's just such a powerful way to approach difficult subjects. Beth, will you come on back in here and say hello to everybody? There she is.
Hello, everybody. I feel I need to make a joke or something, but anyway, you guys were fantastic. This was so interesting. And what a combination of mediums with the comics, the film, murals, and of course, Wendy, I know your art's in a lot of galleries on the Western Slope. And so I just want to thank you all. This was a very, very interesting presentation. And you all did a great job. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth. And thank everybody for coming. And we're just delighted to have done this. This has really been so much fun. And we'll talk about doing one more final one this year, Beth. We'll talk a little later. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Beautiful work, Sommer. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you guys.